You ever notice how, like, sometimes, the simplest questions can, like, lead to these, like, really mind-blowing discoveries?
It's true.
Get ready to dive into one of those today. We are unpacking a study from the 1970s all about pig stress and a bacteria you definitely don't want to mess with Salmonella.
Yeah, and what's fascinating about this particular study is that it really kind of shook up our understanding of how we detect infections, not just in animals, but potentially in humans too.
Right. I mean, who knew pigs could be so pivotal to our understanding of infectious diseases?
Yeah,
So, our listener, you were curious about how stress impacts animals, especially livestock.
right.
This study dives right into that, specifically looking at pigs being transported to the slaughterhouse. Back then, scientists were puzzled by this strange pattern.
They were finding that pigs at slaughterhouses had way higher rates of salmonella infection compared to when they were tested on the farms.
Yeah, it was a real head scratcher.
Yeah,
So imagine you're a scientist back then trying to figure out why there's this discrepancy.
right.
There were two main theories on the table. One was that the pigs were basically clean on the farms, and then they'd pick up salmonella from each other, or the environment during transport, or at the slaughterhouse itself.
Essentially, the slaughterhouse was seen as the main culprit, a potential hotbed of salmonella contamination.
Makes sense. But then there was this second theory, which is where things get interesting.
Okay.
This theory proposed that the pigs were actually already infected with salmonella on the farm.
Yeah, the thinking was maybe something about the stress of the journey. Being loaded onto trucks crammed together was causing them to shed more of the bacteria, making it detectable in tests at the slaughterhouse.
Yeah, it's like the stress was flipping a switch in their gut, making the hidden infection suddenly visible.
Exactly. It raised the question, what if we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to infection? What if stress is masking a whole bunch of cases that we're just not picking up on?
Okay, so how do you go about testing that theory? Well, some clever researchers in Louisiana came up with a pretty ingenious experiment. They basically took 20 pigs on this simulated trip to the slaughterhouse, a joyride, if you will, but with a scientific twist.
And this is a classic example of a well-designed study. They wanted to isolate the effects of transport stress from any potential contamination that could happen at the slaughterhouse itself.
So they took these pigs on a journey, but instead of ending up as well, they brought them right back to the farm. Talk about a roller coaster of emotions for those pigs.
Oh, you can bet these researchers were thorough. Before the pigs even set foot on that truck, they made sure everything was like squeaky clean, salmonella free. They tested the truck, even the feed.
Okay, so pristine pigs, spotless truck ready to roll. Did they find anything out of place before the big joyride?
They actually did find traces of salmonella in one ingredient of the pig feed, something called digester tankage.
Okay.
But importantly, the pigs themselves tested negative for salmonella before they left the farm.
Interesting. So they had this one potential source of contamination in the feed, but the pigs themselves weren't showing signs of infection. What happened after their 3.5-hour adventure?
Well, remember how the theory was that stress might be the key factor. Here's where it gets really compelling. When the pigs got back from their little field trip, they were tested again. And get this now, 30% of them were positive for salmonella.
Whoa, hold on. A third of the pigs went from testing negative to positive just from a 3-hour ride. That's kind of wild.
It is. And to make the connection even stronger, they found traces of the same salmonella bacteria, specifically a type called S. innatum, in the shuck itself. That's the one that's often linked to contaminated food, by the way.
Okay, so it seems like the stress of the ride really did have some kind of impact on these pigs. Like you were saying before, maybe this whole time they had this low-level infection that was being masked somehow.
That's the idea. The researchers hypothesized that maybe the vibrations of the truck, the change in environment, the close proximity to other pigs, all those stressors basically trigger the pigs to start shedding more of the bacteria.
It really makes you wonder about all the things that we miss when we rely on just one test at one point in time, right?
Well, absolutely. And it's not like they stopped there. 2 weeks later, they rounded up the same pigs and took them on another road trip, this time all the way to the slaughterhouse.
Wait, so another stressful experience for these poor pigs. Did they find the same thing the second time around?
They did. Even after 2 weeks, the results were consistent. The stress of the journey was linked to increased detection of salmonella.
So 2 joyrides, 2 times the stress seem to reveal these hidden salmonella infections. It really makes you think, could the same thing be happening in other animals?
Yeah.
In humans, even?
That's exactly the question these researchers started asking. What if our everyday stresses, Work deadlines, traffic jams,
Yeah.
that never-ending to-do list could be masking infections we don't even know we have.
Yeah, it's a bit of a chilling thought, isn't it? Like, what if our bodies are playing this like hide and seek with these infections and we just like haven't figured out how to find them yet?
And here's where it gets even more interesting. The researchers actually found a parallel in another study, this one about cholera.
Cholera, wow. Okay, we're going from pigs to a serious human disease here. How does that fit in?
Well, in this cholera study, they found that giving people a purgative, which basically flushes out your system, actually changed whether or not they tested positive for the bacteria.
So something as simple as a change in bowel movements could like hide or reveal an infection.
Exactly. It suggests that what we can detect with a test might just be a snapshot influenced by all sorts of factors we might not even consider.
Yeah, it's like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to diagnosing illness.
That's a great way to put it. And it makes you wonder, what are we missing? If stress can cause hidden salmonella infections to become detectable in pigs, could the same be true for other conditions? Could stress or diet or medications be impacting how our bodies interact with all sorts of microbes and throwing off our test results?
So you're saying a doctor's visit might need to be more than just a blood test. We might need to factor in stress levels, recent travel, even what we ate for lunch.
It's a possibility. This study, even though it's from decades ago, really highlights the need to look at the bigger picture when it comes to diagnosis and treatment. We need to consider the individual's history, their environment, their stress levels, all of it.
It's amazing to think that this whole conversation started with a bunch of pigs on a road trip.
It just goes to show sometimes the most unexpected research can lead to profound insights with far-reaching implications.
It certainly makes you think twice about those times you got sick right after a stressful event. Maybe it wasn't just a coincidence after all. Well, that's the thought to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of pig stress and the hidden world of infections. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.